You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, another week. Hope y'all are doing well. If you were tuning in to expecting to see Victoria Johnson, she's being mom and nurse today. She contacted me about a couple hours ago. Her little girl is sick, come home from camp with something probably, and so they're taking care of her. So mom duties take precedence. So we'll have her at another time. There's right now for the city, it's kind of that lull in the period, so it's not a lot of news to talk about. So we're going to talk about national news today. And I got a lot of video clips and stuff like that. It's interesting. We're going to talk about elections and convictions. We're going to talk about the conviction of both Mr. Trump and Mr. Hunter Biden, and just a few thoughts on it, and also what impact it's having on the election, which right now is negligible, but we'll go over the data and whatnot. If I sound a little tired and stressed, we're in week 3 of the renovation of the Allard home. It's a beating. Taylor, you've gone through this renovation in the studio. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's always a fun process.
It's a beating.
It's worth it in the end.
I hope so. I really do. First week we had the flooding issue. Last week we did the painting and getting rid of the popcorn ceilings. And let me tell you something, boys and girls.
Oof.
Whoever thought a popcorn ceiling needs to be taken out for a flogging, because first of all, it doesn't look good after a while. And second of all, getting rid of it, holy cow, it is an invasive process. And then today, our friends at Floor Barn, give them a shout out. They're doing our floors right now, and we've been wanting new floors for a long time. And so this is something we've been hoping and wanting to do, and now they're doing a really good job. Robin sent me a few pictures of it, of their progress, and it's, again, our house looks like it's been taken around and stripped to the bone and tossed around, but they're getting some floor laid down, so it's getting good. So what's on your agenda this week, Taylor?
Oh, running your shows. Doing a studio install in Austin later this week. Just
that's why you're gone Thursday, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Yeah, we're not doing a show Thursday for that reason, and for the fact that we should be done with all the construction, but we have about everything we own in the garage or in the kitchen in boxes or whatnot, and so we'll be spending all that day moving the furniture back in and restocking the shelves or whatever. So then I'm going to take that day to do it, since you're going to be gone. It's a good enough time to do it. So this one have a little shorter week. Tomorrow we're going to have Lisa Schwartz with Crazy Eights. So there you go. Let's talk about the sponsors, because they make all this happen, of course. Thank you to Our Place. I was there this morning. I had to get out. Our kitchen's full, and so I went to Our Place and had breakfast and had great service, great food, great price, the whole thing, as always. It's nice to go to a joint where they, like the old Cheers song where everybody knows your name. Well, it's what Our Place is. And Gina's has become like that. I was at Gina's Friday with one of my B&I buddies. I've been taking them there to kind of show off that place, and it's really done well. And it's a great place. The food is good. The service is good. The atmosphere is good. So it's become one of my go-tos already. So there you go. Thank you also. Speaking of go-tos, Wild Cigar and Culture. Nathan and Chris got a lot going on. This Friday they have a party of sorts, a tiki party, and they're going to have a raffle, a grill, and things of that nature. They also have a lot of cigar specials. They got a vendor coming in, so check out Wild Cigar this weekend. Even if you're not a big cigar smoker yourself, yesterday was Father's Day. There'd have been a good opportunity to give a gift card. Or if he is dad or grandpa, whomever does smoke cigars, get his favorite brand out there. They got a huge selection. So there you go. Wild Cigar and Culture. Also, our friends over at Southern Gym, they're closed today on Monday, but they're going to be open the rest of the week, of course. They got great inventory. They got great service, not just because my wife is there, but I've had a lot of people who sat in the guest chair and said, oh, I've been there and just love the service. Or I love the inventory. I like having my rings repaired there. You get a lot of repair work done at Southern Gym. So they got the whole thing. They got a used Rolex collection. And if you think used Rolex is, a hobby, it's an expensive one, so there you go. Also, thank you to our friends over at Old Pro Roofing. Did we miss one? I guess I get used to it. Did we miss Two Maids? But I'll do Old Pro right now. Oh, well, okay, let's do Two Maids. Okay, yes. All right, there you go. Two Maids, Brenda Ramirez, She does great work. A lot of the B&I people use her. She has flexible pricing. She has a deep clean she can come do. She can have, she could tailor any kind of schedule you're looking at, what kind of budget you're looking at. It's over at twomatescleaning.com/Burleson, 817-764-0733. Talk to Brenda, and she'll get you set up, and you pay them based on the rating you give them. Now we talk to Old Pro and our friend John Williams. Old Pro, John Williams, 817-734-2756. So come check your roof out. This is a good time to do it right now. We're not going to have rain or heavy rain, but you look at what's going on in South Texas right now, and you're looking at what's going on in Florida and all this, and you don't want to find out then, do you have a problem with your roof? Find out now. And they'll tell you if you do, or they'll tell you if you don't. So I'm going to have him come out in a couple of weeks to check out my roof and do an inspection and whatnot. And he'll tell me, well, this needs to be happening, or you're fine. There you go. Also, thank you to Jeff Kelly over at the Weddington Agency. Jeff Kelly, 817-781-0546. Or the office number, 817-720-6300, Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com. He'll be on the show, I believe, next week. I'm going to just check the handy-dandy Google Calendar here. Oops, I'm still hitting the wrong buttons after all this time. Okay, so, next week, the 25th, he'll be here a week from tomorrow, as well as Harvest House and Next Step. So we got a full week next week. There you go. So let's talk. I'm going to try to get all this situated here. What we're talking about today is the elections and the convictions, and if there's any connection going on between the two of them. And I'm going to be trying to be objective, but I'm going to give you my opinion because you're entitled to it for one thing, but also because I do believe that there is some things not being discussed in the media that kind of bugs me. And there's some things that I think are being overemphasized in the media, which kind of bugs me, to say the least. So, okay, I'm sharing here. Oh, look at this. Boy, I'm just rocking and rolling here. One more. Where is it? There we go. All right. First of all, we're going to talk about the Trump verdict. All right. The Trump verdict, as we all know, came out guilty, and we have a news clip from that and some yik yak about it. And so I'll just show the first clip, and then we also, right after that, we're going to show Trump's reaction to it, and we'll talk about that.
Felony counts here, all guilty verdicts. Savannah and Lester, back to you.
A total victory for the prosecution here. Laura, the jurors obviously bought the prosecution case in full. There was a consideration of whether or not they might split their verdict or compromise in some way. That is not the case. It's a total rejection of the defendant's case, Donald Trump's case. And we're starting to show you some of the scene outside the courthouse. We could actually hear it, Laura, as you were reading that verdict. And just as you're digesting it, and I know you're keeping your eye on the courtroom as well, what do you make of this verdict?
Savannah, it's a resounding victory for this prosecution in a case that they pitched as something far greater than about hush money. The way they tried to cast this case was about the subversion of democracy, and today the jury agreed with them, Savannah. The former president has tried to cast this as a political prosecution, a political hit job by a Democratic elected DA, by a judge that was biased against him. But these 12 jurors, these 12 New Yorkers, have come to a different conclusion, an independent conclusion, that the former president of the United States is guilty of 34 felony counts. You can hear the crowd here. There's a lot of Trump supporters out here that you can hear are very worked up. As I was reading the verdict, I could hear the crowd emotion growing behind me. I'm only a couple yards away from the area that you can see on your screens right there, sort of the First Amendment area, if you will. It's just a stone's throw away from the press area. It's been growing as the day went on. It's growing after they heard that this verdict was coming in. A lot of emotions running very high in this city right now. Again, this is the presumptive GOP nominee in the middle of an election year for things that he did, that the prosecution said he did to try to corrupt the last election. A just remarkable scene playing out right here in Lower Manhattan.
I'm good.
Thanks for watching.
I'm
Stay
good.
updated.
Okay. I tell you that you were watching this, Taylor. You see that guy they were showing on the right with the sign?
Yeah.
And y'all are watching.
Plant.
Yeah, well, I think that, yeah. I mean, he had to sign free Father Teresa. I mean, good heavens, he looked like he was carrying on like at a North Korean funeral for Kim Il-jung or something. You know, he just going nuts. But anyway, Trump, of course, took this with the usual grace and equipoise that he's known for.
Glenna, before you speak here, we're going to have the president. He's the former president is about to speak as he walks towards the camera. Let's listen in for just a moment.
This was a disgrace. This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA and the whole thing. We didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess. We're a nation in decline, serious decline. Millions and millions of people pouring into our country right now from prisons and from mental institutions, terrorists, and they're taking over our country. We have a country that's in big trouble. But this was a rigged decision right from day one, with a conflicted judge who should have never been allowed to try this case, never. And we will fight for our Constitution. This is long from over. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Taylor, I'm going to throw an audible there and jump ahead. And so let's postpone number 3 until a little bit later in the show, okay? My opinion on this, okay, because since you're entitled to it, like it says, was Trump guilty of a crime? Yes, but not the crime that they tried him for. Okay, in my opinion, basically what he was done was mislabeling or misstating a bookkeeping entry to cover up hush money or money to this porn star, this person who came out of nowhere and claims all these things. Now, was she telling the truth about them having a physical affair? Yeah, I believe so. I believe that happened, but even though Trump denied it over and over again, I find it hard to believe that Trump would deny this particular encounter when he's bragged about so many others. So, there you go. But anyway, the point is that he's guilty of a state felony, or state misdemeanor rather, of, misleading bookkeeping. But what they did is try to connect that to a federal crime, which the federal government had declined to prosecute. Neither the Justice Department nor the Federal Election Commission decided to pursue a case against what this particular DA in New York was claiming, that he used the hush money to affect the outcome of the election. Now you say, well, of course he did. He didn't want to have this embarrassing information out there. But every politician has embarrassing information out there, finds a way to suppress it, sometimes with money, sometimes with others. Mr. Clinton did the same thing. They had a group dedicated to solely put down what they call bimbo eruptions back in the 92 election. And so, and then you have all sorts of other means of covering up these affairs for presidents all throughout our political history. So the idea that he paid this girl money to keep her quiet about this affair, I think most Americans yeah, well, what else is new with Trump? I mean, this is where Trump really pays a price for his braggadocio, shall we say, about his lifestyle and conquest and things like that. Because when he was protesting this woman is lying, he's put it in his own books about, how many women he's been attracted to or attracted by or whatever else. So that's part of the problem. But I do also agree that we had a Democrat DA who ran on the pretext of prosecuting Mr. Trump back in the last election, 2022. He ran on the pretext, I will put Trump in jail kind of thing, and he went after it. And he created, I think, a crime that's pretty novel in its approach. Nobody's ever been tried under New York law or federal law the way Mr. Trump was, and that's why he's claiming it's rigged. And of course, it's in Manhattan, and it's going to be heavily Democratic. I don't really criticize the jurors. I really don't, because I think the jurors acted in good faith. I think if Mr. Biden were having a trial here in Fort Worth, in this red area of the state, I think we'd have 12 people that would search their consciences and try to do the right thing. And so I'm not blaming the jurors at all. As far as the judge, I think he really was biased towards the prosecution. He prevented certain members of the government, federal government, particularly the FEC, from being part of the case for testifying in the trial. And then you have Mr. Trump's behavior during the trial. That did not help. Not just the glares and taking the little cat naps or whatever else. It's the stuff he put on afterwards on social media about the judge, about the prosecution, about the jurors sometimes, and that's not going to help. And so his behavior during the trial may have made this easier for them to convict. And I wish he had just maintained a bit of decorum throughout all this. But that, we know Mr. Trump. We've known him for 8 years now, in a political sense, and so. What's to be expected. So my summary, if you will, about this whole thing, about the trial is, at most, Mr. Trump committed a state-level misdemeanor, in my opinion. And I don't doubt the guilty verdict on that. But the idea that he was doing it to disrupt democracy or divert democracy is rubbish, because that's what campaigning is, and that's what campaigns do. I can promise you, there's going to be people that are going to try to eliminate any kind of negative stories about Joe Biden, and they're not going to do it by persuasion and whatever. They may bring the checkbook with them if they haven't already. And we just don't know about it. That's been part of our political history, and that's why he feels like he's so persecuted, because he's done nothing that many of the politicians haven't done before. I'm not really trying to defend the character of Mr. Trump, all right? I think most people know how I feel about him. I'm not that big a fan at all. There's some policies I have some, sympathy for, I like and whatnot. But as far as a person, Mr. Trump is a very difficult person to defend with it because of his lack of restraint and some of the things he throws out there. There's hot opinions he throws out there. So I'm not trying to defend him, but I do believe this process. There is an element of politics involved that led to this result. And I think the judge in particular and the DA in particular did this for political results. There you go. Are you going to see this in ads? Well, I tell you what. I've changed my mind again, Taylor. Let's go ahead number 3, because we're going to talk about the Hunter Biden situation. Okay. I know. I'm just confused.
You're fine.
I just thought, okay, I'm in a kind of that zone. So I want to talk about Hunter Biden's conviction and whatnot. We'll talk about that as well. So go ahead and roll that one.
All right, let's go back to Ryan Nobles and bring in NBC's Sarah Fitzpatrick. She's been covering the trial from the beginning. It was inside the courtroom when the verdict was read. Sarah, what was it like in there?
Your wireless IP.
Sarah doesn't have her earpiece in quite yet. So, Sarah, Lester just asked you what it was like inside the courtroom as the verdict was read.
It was quiet. As soon as the judge walked in and the jury walked in, everyone kind of jumped to attention. And it all happened very quickly. Hunter Biden sat at the table, eyes focused on the jury. He sat with his hands folded, and the foreperson read the verdict. And it went very quickly. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And after that, he turned around and hugged the associates, the law associates that were sitting directly behind him. He hugged his attorney, Abby Lowell, as well as David Kalansky, another attorney on the case. And then after the judge asked if there was any additional business, both his attorney and the prosecutors said no. And he walked out. He walked into the aisle where he kissed his wife, Melissa, on the lips. And then slowly the kind of Biden supporters in silence, essentially walked out into the aisle and into the hallway of the courtroom, where they then went into the defense room. I was sitting outside watching in the hallway for several minutes while Hunter Biden and his closest supporters kind of stayed in that room. He walked out. You could kind of hear the door open, and Hunter Biden walked out and said, "Ready? Okay, everybody, let's go." He walked out holding his wife's hand, and directly behind him was the First Lady with sunglasses on, looking down at the floor. Hunter ensured that the First Lady got into the elevator, and they got into the elevator. He exited with a slight smile, and that was it. And then suddenly the hallways were quiet. We saw the jury walk out through a separate hallway secured by the U.S. Marshals. One at a time, they kind of passed through our vision, all looking directly at the press that was left behind. And then that was it. Clerks started closing doors and kind of preparing files to be carried out, and that was all. I saw some supporters kind of in the hallways.
Okay, I guess we're good.
Supporters of the Biden family.
All right. Here's the thing about Hunter Biden's case. Okay, there's no question he was guilty. All right, and I found it, I guess, reassuring in a sense that the Wilmington, Delaware jury found him guilty, because this is the home base of the Bidens. It has been for 50 years, his political base and whatnot. And a lot of people were speculating that Hunter would get off because of that, and they came back very quickly with a guilty verdict. So much credit to the jury, and both juries. I mean, we got to give the jury some slack here, because they're both under a great deal of attention and pressure from outside pressures to find a guilty or not guilty verdict. And so I applaud both their efforts. But here's the thing that kind of has been bugging me about the media, and kind of been bugging me about the supporters of Mr. Biden, is that they're saying, see, the system works and Mr. Trump is wrong. There's only one reason why Hunter Biden went on trial for that gun, and it's because of the judge, Mary Ellen Noriega, let's say it right, denied their plea deal about a year ago. Last summer, they came up with this ludicrous plea deal, and the judge, Noriega, was like, what is this crap? Basically, he would have played the innocent and gotten away with basically like 40 hours of community service and like go through this gun training thing, and all those charges would be dropped, not just for these, but any other legal cases that were pending, like his tax case. Basically, it was a get-out-of-free jail card that was given to him by the DOJ. And the judge said, this is nuts. I'll see you in court. They tried that same thing, by the way. Hunter Biden has a trial in September in California over tax evasion. They tried that there, and the judge said, I'll see you in court. So the idea that the Justice Department, was doing its due diligence on this is rubbish, because they would have given Hunter Biden a free pass if they could. All right? Attorney General Garland is a political hack. Now, you'll say, well, Trump had his political hacks. Yeah, okay, good. I'll accept that. Normally, you want an objective attorney general, but, I don't think Mr. Trump had one until he got William Barr. And then when Barr wouldn't play ball, it caused all this conflict. But as far as Merrick Garland, he's done a very politically oriented job. But as far as Hunter Biden was concerned, he was going to get off with hardly anything. What makes me mad is that had this been a young African-American lad from Fort Worth, he'd be due in 2 to 3 years in jail, and they wouldn't even had a trial. Yet they were going to get this guy off for buying guns while under the influence of drugs and lying about it on a federal form. And the idea that he wasn't on drugs that particular day he bought it was ridiculous, and the jury rejected it, as they should. Now, they're going to appeal, like Mr. Trump is going to appeal his, and so we'll see what happens with those. Second thing that also kind of bugs me a little bit is Hunter Biden is not a sympathetic character. And I know he's had all the drug issues and the addictions and all this other stuff, but he's also done some pretty terrible things. And yet they're trying to portray him as just this poor young man who's caught in the throes of cocaine addiction. But he's always been a rogue and a scoundrel. But my problem with Mr. Biden, I sympathize with him as a father to a point, but that point ends because I think a lot of the Biden family has enabled this to happen. And they've used Hunter Biden and they've used Joe Biden to profit from all this financially. There's no question in my mind that Hunter Biden has had a great deal of business thrown his way because he's Hunter Biden. Now you say, well, that's the perks of being the son of a president. when you get the president involved, or the when he was vice president, or when he was senator, intervening in behalf of his son to help him make money, then we got a problem. That's the problem. It's not that he was trading on his name. Everybody does that. The Trump boys do that. Most people, who are connected to a president will try to monetize it to some degree, and it's distasteful, but it's not illegal. But the point is that Joe himself was intervening in some of these things. I'm quite convinced. But they're trying to show that Hunter Biden, if it weren't for the drugs, he'd be this model citizen. No, he had a child out of wedlock with a Arkansas stripper that he denied and tried to deny paternity and tried to deny child support. Joe Biden denied that granddaughter's existence until he was forced to admit it. And she's never met Joe Biden. He's never met his granddaughter. She's never been invited to the family events over in their beach house in Delaware. And accordingly, what I read in the news is that the stripper mother of this young girl, is writing a book that's going to come out the week before the Democratic convention. And I'm sure I have all these gross details and whatever else. And she'll make a few bucks and she'll make a few rounds on the talk shows on the right. And then there you go. But as far as Hunter Biden, he is not an ethical person. And they're trying to portray all this as that it's all the addiction's fault. It is not all the addiction's fault. Now, I understand Joe Biden wanted to support his son. As a father, I understand that. That's not really my criticism. It's the political bent they're trying to give this. All right? If this were happening to my son or daughter, God forbid, I would not disown them either. I would say to the public, like Joe has, he's my son or my daughter, and I'm proud of her, or him, whatever. You know what I'm saying. I'm proud of my child, and I'm not going to disown him. But as far as trying to manipulate the situation to engender sympathy for the situation for political benefit, I'm out on that. Okay? Now, will it have a political impact? Well, I think it already has. Biden's already put out some ads. He bought a $50 million ad buy in the battleground states, and this is one of them. So if you run that ad, if you would, Taylor.
In the courtroom, we see Donald Trump for who he is. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and he committed financial fraud. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's been working, lowering health care costs and making big corporations pay their fair share. This election is between a convicted criminal who's only out for himself and a president who's fighting for your family.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Pardon me while I reach for the airsick bag. But anyway, was there anything he said that untrue? It's all political. I don't know about the healthcare costs coming down. As far as the corporations paying their fair share, that's a whole nother conversation, okay? And it's, I don't want to get off into the weeds about is that good policy or not. As far as him working hard for the American people, he has the shortest work week of any president since Calvin Coolidge, and that's not an exaggeration. That's documentable fact. And so the point is that, ads are what they are, okay? They're not there to, be objective and give both sides, and I get it. As far as the content on the Trump side of that ad, they're not going to bring up, but, here's some extenuating circumstances, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to happen in an ad. So is it going to hurt Mr. Biden? Or rather, I'm sorry, Mr. Trump? My particular view is none of these things need to be brought to the attention of the American people. Again, they know what's going on. They know who Mr. Trump is. They know the legal situation. It's one of the most remarkable elections in my mind because let's say the positions and the people's commitment to either candidate is rock solid and unchangeable. I mean, the polls haven't hardly moved at all, and I'm going to get to that towards the end of the show. Here's another reason why I think that, Biden keeps shooting himself in the foot for some of these things. You look at that political ad and you say, why would anybody vote for Donald Trump? And why people listening to the show who are going to vote for Trump do, that's their reasons are fine because that's their vote. If you're listening and you vote for Mr. Biden, well, it's your vote. Your reasons don't have to be justified to me, certainly. And that's not what I'm getting at. But the point is that you'd think with all this stuff going on, Trump would be sunk in the polls, and it's not happening. Why is it that Mr. Biden cannot seem to pull away on this issue, on the election, based on the fact that, yes, he was convicted, whether you think it's a fair trial or not, it's not an unfair statement to say he's a convicted felon. And you're going to see that phrase over and over and over again. I bet in the Democrat convention, they're not going to call him President Trump. They'll call him President Convicted Felon or something like that. But this is one reason why a lot of people have such great hesitation for choosing Mr. Biden again. Okay, if you run that clip, to some of his better statements, you might say.
I was elected. I went to what they call a G7 meeting, all the NATO leaders. I was in the south of England. And I sat down and I said, America's back. And Mitterrand from from France looked at me.
Mitterrand died in 1986.
Said, you know, why, how long are you back for? And I looked at him, and the Chancellor of Germany said, what would you say, Mr. President, if you picked up the paper tomorrow in the London Times, and the London Times said, 1,000 people break through the House of Commons, break down the doors, 2 Bobbies are killed in order to stop the election of the Prime Minister. What would you say? I never thought about it from that perspective. What would we say if that happened in another democracy around the world? Of American power. It all goes to, was America keep its word? Does America move forward? There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition.
He forgot Hamas's name, is what's happening.
Yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas. The conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. Your Majesty, over to you.
Okay, I think we're good. We're showing Mr. Biden kind of wandering the stage a bit. Irma, my old student, Irma Crisp, says here, we can't have it both ways. The truth is that a jury of Americans convicted both these men. Absolutely. Not a judge, not a DA, etc. A jury of Americans, not much different from you or me. Both are guilty, in my opinion. And I agree. That's what I said. That's why I said the jury deserves credit. I do believe the jury, though, will respond to how the judge directs them. The directions they get at the end of the process is very, very important. What to look for, how they need to go about their business. And I think particularly in the Trump case, there was a certain direction. But, you know, the thing about it is a judge did convict Mr. Trump of a civil case of defrauding the government or something like that, of, you know, basically inflating his assets for as collateral purposes for loans. The DA, or the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, also campaigned on that, and she brought the case and brought a civil case against Mr. Trump, and that's what they're referring to in the ad, and that was decided by a judge, not a jury. Also, she goes on to say, personally, I'm disappointed that this is the best we can do as a country in terms of presidential candidates. Absolutely, amen and amen. We have a lot of good people in both parties that could do the job. We may not agree with their politics or their policies, but we could have better people than this. But at the last 2 elections and this one coming up, we haven't had the best. Okay? You know, I look at the election of 2012 between Obama and Romney. I'm not a big fan of Mr. Obama. I think everybody knows that. But I don't think there was any disqualifying character flaws that kept him from being a decent candidate, at least. Same thing with Mr. Romney. I agreed with more of his policies, not everyone, but more of them, hence my vote for him. But there was no character flaws that would be disqualifying. Here, I think we have 2 men that are very flawed, and same with Hillary Clinton in 2016. And so that's a real problem. And Joe just can't help but shoot himself in the foot. What I saw there in that clip, is why so many Americans have such pause. We don't want to hear about from his press secretary how vigorous he is and how they can't keep up with him and all this other business, when we could see with our own two eyes he is stumbling through these press conferences and statements, and he can't think clearly. And we're going to see, I don't know if we'll see this next Thursday. A week from Thursday, they have a debate. And maybe Robert Kennedy Jr. may qualify for the debate. That'd be interesting. But anyway, it's going to be a debate. And I think is what is going to happen is what happened with the State of the Union address, that they will have Mr. Biden better prepared and rested and caffeinated or whatever. I'm not going to go into he was drugged routine. I have no evidence of that. I mean, I need to see that or hear about it from credible source, not just be speculating out there. But he'll probably survive the debate. I think the real potential loser debate could be Trump if he acted like he did back in 2020 in the first debate, where he acted like a 12-year-old. If he just handles himself with a handful of decorum and a little bit of restraint, he'll come off okay. And that may be enough for people to say, okay, he's not as crazy as I thought, and I'll vote for him. Now, of course, if Biden has a senior moment, then you're going to have all sorts of hell breaking loose. And then you have, the conspiracy ideas that this is a political conviction against Mr. Trump. And Biden throws gasoline on the fire. Show him the next clip about him smirking as he's walking off the stage.
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
For those listening and not really watching, he's walking off the stage, they ask him the question, he turns around and smirks at him. And see, I've already seen that in internet ads for Mr. Trump. Now, was that smart of Mr. Biden? No, and that's what I'm saying. He should, first, if he wanted to address it, he should have addressed it forthrightly and said, "I either no comment or whatever," not just walk off the stage, give this this little grin, and then move on. And so that's just dumb, and that's why people have the idea that this is a political conspiracy against Mr. Trump. And do I buy that totally? I think Mr. Trump did some things that need to be investigated and should be looked at objectively. I do believe that his conduct on January 6th needs to be looked at, and if they see how to try it in a court, I'm not opposed to that, because that was a pretty heinous day. The one in Georgia is going to be postponed indefinitely because the attorney general, the prosecuting attorney there for Fulton County, Ms. Fonnie Willis, has made a complete spectacle of herself, and a Georgia appellate court has overturned the earlier lower court decision that she can remain on the case, and so she may get bounced off the case eventually. They'll probably go to the Georgia Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens there. So you may never see Mr. Trump try for that. As far as the document case, I don't know how far that's going to go. I think he's guilty. I think it's apparent he took documents without permission out of the White House, but they're going to make a case with, so did Mr. Biden, and so did this guy, and so did this guy. So we'll see what happens with that. You haven't heard much noise about that one. But it's the bottom line is this: Republicans and Democrats who adhere to a certain political ideology have nowhere really to go, because the ideologies aren't being led by the two men. This is an election of Mr. Biden or of Mr. Trump, not of Republicans or Democrats. A lot of people, myself included, have a very difficult time getting behind one of these candidates on both parties. I've talked to Democrat friends, I've talked to Republican friends, and they're all saying the same thing. I don't know how I'm going to vote, because they know that they prefer the policies of one over the other, but they know that both these guys are incredibly flawed. And it's really, really difficult. And I'll have to say, as a side note, I am the only one amongst my more closer peer group of a dozen or so people that still thinks that Mr. Biden will be on the ballot in November. They all are convinced that he'll be replaced. And, and I read some of the Democrat authors and opinion makers and essayists are writing the same thing. and they're throwing out their choices to whom they would replace Mr. Biden with, and one of them came up last week, Hillary Clinton. How would you like that, to vote for Hillary Clinton again, Mr. Perky?
I think that.
Yeah, that would be.
That's what I think.
That's what I think too. Yeah, so that would be something, having Hillary step in, do that. But I mean, and I'm not reading this from far right. I read this in Atlantic. I read this in the New Yorker. I read this editorials in the Post and the Times that Mr. Biden needs to step aside. And as far as Mr. Trump, that ain't going to happen. So, and that's the difficulty I have. No, I've been a Republican all my life, but it's hard to support some of the things he said and some of the things that he's done. And, maybe there's some policy agreement there, but he's making a lot of noise about using his office when he gets into office on some sort of vengeance tour. He's going to start prosecuting the Bidens with the DOJ. He's going to start prosecuting maybe Mr. Obama, maybe even Mr. Clinton, for all we know. And he said pretty clearly there will be retribution for this. And I don't want a president that's going to be using his office for retribution. I want to be focused on dealing with the issues of the country, not his personal issues. I don't want him going after people unless, let the Justice Department be objective and do the job, not like it is now and whatnot. But I don't want to hear about, him going after somebody because he's a political or personal enemy and using the government power to do it. So that's why everybody keeps, both sides has paused. Biden is clearly not physically capable of doing the job for another 4 years, period. And I say this sadly from personal perspective of my own family, seeing what's happening to my father. My father is at the age that Mr. Biden will be in his third year of his second term. And it's been really, really tough, and I'll just leave it at that. But he's not physically, mentally, cognitively able to do the job. Yet they're sticking with him. Trump has all this baggage with him, and he has declared that he's going to use the government as a personal weapon, and that's a problem. Let's see what's happened in the ads. Okay, let's look at the general poll first. What's happening in the polling? This is from this morning's Real Clear Politics, and what you see here on the national level, Mr. Trump is at overall 0.8 ahead. Before the guilty conviction came in, he was at 0.9. So, we're talking about statistical noise here. So it really hasn't affected him much nationally. And, but see, national polls, I don't put a lot of stock in that. But because you're talking about across the country, and all this other business, and presidential elections aren't cross-country elections; they are individual state elections. But that being said, at this particular point in the campaign in 2020, Mr. Biden was at 5.8, and now he's down 0.8. So he's lost 5 full points, or 6 full points. Get your math right. And that's significant. And he also, Mr. Biden, is at the lowest approval rating of a presidential election, lower than Trump's was in 2020, lower than Mr. Obama's or Mr. Bush's, both of them. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I think Mr. Obama's around like 48% approval, and Mr. Bush in 2004 was around 48%, 47%. And Trump was like at 41%. Biden's at 37.6%. National approval rating on the average. I don't know how he's going to win like that, because it's going to be very difficult. I really do believe if the Republicans are running just your typical candidate, there'd be no contest. And I could say the same thing for the Democrats. If they were running a stronger candidate, there'd be no contest. I think what Irma said was correct, that is this the best we can do? Seriously. All right, look at the battleground one, okay? We have that one pulled up, I believe. We had trouble with that this morning. There it is. The battleground states are where it's going to be fought. All right. And right now, Trump, if you combine the battleground states, 47.9 to 44.6, in my opinion, it's going to come down to 3 states, whether or not who wins. I think what's interesting is that Georgia And North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona have been solidly Trump for a while, and I'm not even sure I'd call them battlegrounds anymore. They're looking at the last election and calling them battlegrounds. But the three states that really have been micro-focused, particularly by the Biden administration, is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That's where the bulk of his campaigning has been. Mr. Biden has visited Pennsylvania more than any other state by far, not just because it's next door to his home state of Delaware and it's a quick trip and all this other stuff, but that he has to have Pennsylvania. And right now, the battleground polls have a combined 2.3 advantage for Mr. Trump. And as far as Wisconsin, it's literally a dead heat, 0.1 in favor of Trump. That's just statistical data. And Michigan, same thing, 0.3. It's basically dead even. Those are the states to really look at. Now, there's a couple of states that have popped up out of nowhere as being potential battlegrounds. One is Virginia. Virginia has been pretty reliably Democrat for the most part the last 20 years. The last president they voted for, Republican, they voted for president was Bush's second election in 2004. But their last two polls that have come out in state polls have showed them dead heat, tied. And Mr. Biden's like 2.2 overall in Virginia. And he won that state easily last election. He won about 9 points. The other one is Minnesota. Minnesota, Mr. Trump is only behind by like 4 points. And it's cut the deficit in half roughly in the last 6 months. And so that's a couple states to look at. It's a lot of data and a lot of stuff like that. But the bottom line with all of this is that we have a really hard choice to make. And I have a great deal of concern. I have very big concerns if Mr. Trump uses the government for personal vendettas. I have a great deal of concern if Mr. Biden is not cognitively able to do the job and it passes to Harris, whom I have even a lower opinion of. Let's see what Irma says. I appreciate her joining us today. The consensus I'm feeling for my generation on both sides of the aisle is that we're going to vote for those that get us closer to our desired destination, but no one I know is happily voting. I believe that. I talked to my son, who's Irma's age, and he says the same thing. He says his group of friends are like, we can't stand either one of them. And so, they have real issues with both of them. There's no way they're going to vote for Trump. I never would. But they're like, they don't think they're going to vote for Mr. Biden either. And really, so who are they going to vote for? They may not. I'm reading a whole lot of articles, including one today in Washington Post, talk about how a lot of people and even the battleground states saying, I'm out. I don't really want to mess with either one of them. So even though this has been a highly contentious election and maybe one of the lowest participated in, and which it strikes me because in 2016, that's the lowest participated in election in this century anyway, and one of the lowest since 1996. And Brandon, Chris, boy, got the whole Chris family on board. I think there isn't enough talk about the mental stability of Trump, but everyone seems to be focusing on Biden's mental awareness. Trump almost seems to ramble like my late demented grandmother. Well, I don't know so much it's that Trump is suffering from the same malady as Mr. Biden. I think he's always been a blowhard and rambled on and on and on. He did this in 2016 and whatnot. Now, if Mr. Crisp is talking about, psychological issues or whatever else, I'm not an expert in that. I do believe he does ramble and he goes off the topic all the time, but he's been doing that since his political career began. And so I don't attribute that to dementia. I attribute it to the fact that Mr. Trump is a natural blowhard. And so there you are. But as far as him being psychologically unfit for the job, I'm not going to make that statement or that judgment without like evidence or hard fact. Just because I think somebody might be nuts doesn't mean they're nuts. So I don't want to go in that hole. But I think what Brandon is bringing out though is that this is the perception of a lot of people. This is what a lot of people think about Mr. Trump, and same thing about Mr. Biden. I do feel badly for the crisp generation, so to speak, here. The whole that age group, because they have very poor choices, And neither one of them is going to be addressing the seriousness of the budget deficits and the entitlement program problems and all this other stuff because they're focused on other things. And that's a real problem. It's not going that deficit and the debt is serious problems. And I think no one's addressing that. They're not addressing the issues. They're talking about each other. So there you go. Taylor, do you fall in that category?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our generation has been through unprecedented crisis, says Mr. Crisp. Through unprecedented crises constantly. I would love to get back to precedented times. Well, me being the old coot that I am, there were times, even when I was much younger, I had concerns about the country. The 70s were terrible. And I was just a kid in high school mostly. And so I was beginning to pay attention to what was going on. And that was, and I did all the reading of the history of that era. And I think it resembles this era quite a bit. A lot of people look at the 60s as a time of upheaval. The 70s were much worse. But I do believe that the last whole decade has been incredibly hard on the American people. COVID, of course, played a major, major role. I think I was talking to Sydney Milstead the other day. We were talking about, and she's a younger woman, and she was talking about pre-COVID and post-COVID. And that's what I think a lot of people are going to refer to this era, pre-COVID and post-COVID. Like my generation talks about pre-9/11, post-9/11. Or the older generation I know, they'd have the marker in their generation was the assassination of John Kennedy, and the marker of my grandparents' generation was Pearl Harbor. And so there's always this event that they mark time by, and I think COVID is going to be that marker for them. Now, as far as this, how you vote is up to you. I'm not here to tell you to vote for Trump or Biden because that's inappropriate. I mean, because that's not really what people turn in for. Who should I vote for, Mr. Allard? In my opinion, it didn't mean much, even though you're entitled to it. I have great concerns. And my advice about voting is vote your conscience or not vote your conscience. And just, if you say, I'm not going to vote, this is one of the very few times in my life I could say, hey, I can see why. I've always been highly critical of people who don't vote because it's one of the best and most necessary components of democracy in our republic system is to vote. And I've always been highly critical. But as far as the presidential vote, it's going to be very difficult. Now, Ernie, you read my mind. I said I would encourage everyone to make it out to vote for the rest of the ballot. I will be doing that. I'm not sitting out this election. I just don't know what to do about the presidential slot. But I will be for the rest of the ballot because all those down ballot people do a lot more impact upon my life than what's going on at the top quite often. So, yeah, do vote for that. I'm not saying just stay home during the election 2-week period and election day. Do go out and vote. But as far as this presidential election, I understand why you're at such a quandary because I am too. I know, to be frank, I'll be transparent here. I will not be voting for Mr. Biden under any circumstance. I don't know if I can for Mr. Trump because of the reasons I've already stated. And as far as going to a third party, Robert Kennedy's a kook, all right, and that's all there is to it. And these others are, way out to the left or right, so forget them. So I got a real problem coming up. And so do we all. Thank you, Taylor, for your nimbleness on the ads and also the videos and whatnot.
Always. Right.
Do we have the Cleburne Railroaders schedule? I believe you have it somewhere. There you go. Good. All right. I always like to do the Railroaders at the end so we can go off on a good note. Tuesday, tomorrow, they have Tasty Tuesday. Wednesday, they have Wiener Wednesday. It's like dollar hot dog night. That's going to be great. You will get your fill there. Thursday, you're going to have your Salute to Heroes with a T-shirt giveaway. Friday, Fireworks Friday. Also, Saturday's a big one because it's going to be not just a throwback night where they're wearing the uniforms of the former Cleburne Eagles, which was a minor league team a century ago, but it's also going to be honoring the Harvest House the Harvest House is going to be there. And also Marcus Simeon replica ring is present, or giveaways. And so maybe get Marcus Simeon there. Hey, Rangers, I'm skipping the game Saturday. I'm going to go to Cleburne. And of course, Spike's Kids, Spike, if you don't know, is the Spike's Kids is a kids club for the young Railroader fans. It's going to have its Kids Club Sunday with a lot of free tickets for the kids, but whatever, that day you want to go, whatever day you choose, is going to be a good game. It's going to be a good time. So, let's see. Any other things with the Railroaders? Oh, yes. I remember. Tomorrow we're going to have Lisa Schwartz on, and she's going to be the honoree, or Crazy Eights is, at the July 4th one. And they're going to have a massive fireworks show that day, that after the game. So there you go. Well, I've unloaded all this. Share this with your friends. And I hope y'all are doing well, and I hope we all do well. And try to keep our heads above water and try to drown out some of the noise that we're hearing in the media. And we'll see y'all tomorrow.